He was a billionaire who had everything money could buy. But on this one ordinary evening, he came home early and found his maid doing something impossible. Something that would shatter everything he thought he knew about success, about worth, about what it means to be truly rich. What he discovered standing in that doorway would haunt him, transform him, and ultimately save him from the emptiest life a wealthy man can live. This is a true story of the day a housekeeper reminded a billionaire what really matters. And I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll never look at the people around you the same way again. Welcome to Radiant Story and Tales. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you are watching from. Let me tell you about a moment that changed everything. A moment so simple, yet so powerful, that it would shake the very foundation of one man's world. Picture this: a grand mansion in the heart of London, the kind of place you see in magazines. Crystal chandeliers hanging from ceilings, so high they seem to touch the clouds. Marble floors polished to perfection. Paintings worth millions lining the walls. This was the home of James Hamilton, one of the wealthiest men in England, a man who built empires, a man whose name made stock markets tremble. On this particular evening, James came home early. His driver had brought him through the iron gates, past the fountain, up the long driveway. His Italian leather shoes clicked against the marble as he pushed open the heavy oak doors. He was exhausted, tired from endless meetings, tired from negotiations worth billions. All he wanted was silence, maybe a glass of expensive whiskey, maybe just peace. But what he saw stopped him cold. There, in his grand living room, stood Elena, his housekeeper, the woman who cleaned his floors, who prepared his meals, who moved through his mansion like a shadow. She was wearing her simple gray uniform, but she wasn't cleaning. She wasn't dusting the furniture or arranging flowers. She was standing in front of a large whiteboard, a marker in her hand, writing equations. Complex, beautiful equations that danced across the board like poetry. And sitting there, cross-legged on the Persian rug, was his son, 7-year-old Oliver. His eyes were wide with wonder, watching Elena as if she were performing magic. And in a way, she was. James stood frozen in the doorway, his mouth slightly open, his briefcase still in his hand. The chandelier above cast golden light on this impossible scene. Elena was teaching his son, not simple addition or subtraction. No, she was teaching him advanced mathematics, calculus, formulas that James himself hadn't touched since his university days at Oxford. For a moment, he thought his mind was playing tricks on him. Perhaps he was more tired than he realized. But no, the whiteboard was real. The numbers were real. And Elena's brilliance was undeniably real. He watched silently as she spoke to Oliver, her voice gentle but confident. You see, darling, mathematics isn't about memorizing numbers. It's about patterns. It's about understanding how the universe speaks to us. Those words hit James like a thunderbolt. When was the last time he had taught his son anything meaningful? When was the last time he had sat with Oliver and explained the world to him? He couldn't remember. His world was mergers and acquisitions, stock prices and courtrooms, phone calls and business dinners. He had left his son's world to nannies and tutors and expensive private schools. Yet here was Elena, the woman he barely noticed each day, the woman he greeted with a polite nod and nothing more. She was giving his son something precious, something James had never managed to give. She was giving him inspiration. James's mind raced backward through time. Elena had been with him for 3 years. She came from somewhere in Eastern Europe. He vaguely remembered. Poland, perhaps? Or Romania? He had never asked. She was quiet, hard-working, always polite. She blended into the background of their luxurious life. To him, she was just part of the household staff. Nothing more. But standing there, watching her explain complex theories with such ease, such passion, he realized something terrible. He had never truly seen her. He had never asked about her life before this mansion. He had never wondered what dreams she carried in her heart. Oliver's small voice broke through James's thoughts. Miss Elena, does this mean I can solve problems that even grown-ups can't? Elena smiled. Her whole face lit up with warmth. Yes, my dear Oliver, you are capable of far more than you know. All you need is curiosity and the courage to try. Courage. That word echoed in James's mind. He had built business empires. He had faced down competitors. He had made decisions that affected thousands of lives. But had he ever had the courage to truly be present in his own son's life? Standing there, watching this beautiful moment, he felt something crack inside his chest. He wanted to walk away, to retreat to his study before anyone noticed him. But his feet wouldn't move. His heart demanded answers. Finally, Elena turned slightly. She gasped when she saw him standing there. The marker trembled in her fingers. Her confidence melted into nervous humility. "Mr. Hamilton," she stammered. I didn't expect you home so early." Oliver spun around, his face breaking into a huge smile. "Dad, look, Miss Elena is teaching me real mathematics, the kind that geniuses use." James forced himself to smile, but his eyes stayed locked on Elena. "What's going on here?" His voice came out steadier than he felt. Elena lowered her gaze. "I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't mean to overstep my boundaries. Oliver found my old notebook one day and—" "Old notebook?" James interrupted, surprised. "Yes," Elena whispered. "I used to study engineering. Back home. But life—" Her voice trailed off, breaking slightly at the edges. And just like that, James's entire world tilted on its axis. This woman wasn't just a housekeeper. She was a scholar, a dreamer, someone with buried ambitions and untold stories. That night, James couldn't sleep. The days that followed were different. James found himself coming home earlier. He would linger in doorways, watching quietly as Elena taught his son. He saw things he had never noticed before. He saw the way Elena tailored each lesson to Oliver's curiosity. She didn't just teach formulas. She told stories. She used analogies that made Oliver laugh. She turned mathematics into an adventure. When she explained geometry, she talked about castles and bridges. When she taught algebra, she spoke about treasure maps and secret codes. And Oliver transformed before James's eyes. The boy who used to fidget during his expensive tutoring sessions now sat completely still, absorbed, his pencil moving furiously across his notebook. The child who complained about homework now asked for more problems to solve. But what touched James most deeply was how Elena wove life lessons into the mathematics. When Oliver made a mistake, she never scolded. Instead, she would say, "Every mistake is proof that you're trying, Oliver. Every great discovery in history was built on a mountain of mistakes." She taught him patience when problems seemed impossible. She taught him resilience when he wanted to give up. She taught him humility by showing him how much there was still to learn. James's hardened heart, the heart that had grown cold through years of ruthless business dealings, began to soften. He started to see his son becoming not just smarter, but kinder, more thoughtful, more confident. And none of this came from James's wealth or connections or power. It all came from Elena. One evening, as James sat quietly in the corner of the room, Elena finally approached him. Her voice was hesitant. "Mr. Hamilton, if you prefer, I will stop the lessons. I know this isn't my place." James looked at her, really looked at her, for perhaps the first time. "Elena," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you've given my son more than I ever could. Please don't stop." He paused, gathering courage. "I want to know more about you. I want to understand why someone with your gifts ended up here." Elena's eyes widened in shock. Slowly, carefully, she began to tell her story. She had grown up in a small town in Bulgaria. Her father was a factory worker. Her mother cleaned houses. But Elena was brilliant. She won scholarship after scholarship. She studied engineering at university, dreaming of designing bridges and schools for poor communities. She wanted to build a better world. But then tragedy struck. Her father had an accident at the factory. He died, leaving massive medical debts behind. Her family was drowning. Elena had no choice. She left university in her final year. She came to England to work as a domestic helper, sending every penny back home to her mother and younger siblings. As she spoke, tears rolled down her cheeks. She had carried this pain silently for years, never complaining, never asking for pity. She simply did her work and held on to whatever pieces of her dream she could. James felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Shame. Not shame in Elena's position, but shame in his own blindness. He had walked past greatness every single day, too busy counting his millions to notice the treasure standing right in front of him. "I want to help you," James said firmly. "I'll pay for you to finish your degree. I'll arrange everything. You can—" But Elena shook her head gently. "Mr. Hamilton, I appreciate your kindness more than you'll ever know. But right now, my greatest joy is helping Oliver, watching him grow and learn. If I can help shape him into a good man, that will be enough for me." Tears burned James's eyes. In that moment, he understood what true wealth looked like. It wasn't in his bank accounts. It wasn't in this mansion or his fleet of cars. True wealth was standing before him in a gray uniform, a woman who had lost everything but still chose to give. James started spending more time at home. He sat in on the lessons, asking questions, learning alongside his son. His business partners noticed a change. He was different, less harsh, more patient, more human. They didn't know the reason was a Bulgarian housekeeper who had reminded him of life's greatest equation. Love plus sacrifice equals a meaningful legacy. But just when everything seemed perfect, the storm clouds gathered. It started with a phone call. James was in his office when his legal team contacted him. Word had spread about Elena teaching Oliver. Somehow, the media had caught wind of it. "Sir," his lawyer said carefully, "some of your shareholders are concerned. They're saying it's inappropriate for household staff to be educating your son. They're worried about what people will think." James felt anger rising in his chest. What people think? Since when do I care about gossip? But the pressure mounted. Within days, headlines appeared. "Billionaire's son taught by Maid. Is Britain's richest family making a mistake?" Social media exploded with opinions. Some people thought it was beautiful. Others mocked him mercilessly. His board members called emergency meetings. Old friends pulled him aside at the club, speaking in hushed voices. Even some relatives questioned his judgment. "James, think about the family name. Think about Oliver's future. Surely you can afford the best tutors in the world." For a man like James, reputation had always been everything. In business, perception was reality. He had spent decades building his name, his brand, his image. But as he stood in Oliver's room one evening, watching his son's face glow with joy as Elena explained a mathematical proof, something became crystal clear. Reputation meant nothing if it wasn't built on truth. And the truth was simple. Elena had unlocked his son's heart in a way no expensive tutor ever had. Still, the storm raged on. Investors threatened to withdraw support. Journalists camped outside the mansion gates. The headmaster of Oliver's elite private school called, politely suggesting that James hire qualified professionals instead of relying on domestic help. Each comment was a test. Each whisper was a challenge to his resolve. James's wife, Catherine, who had been traveling for months, finally returned home. She had seen the headlines. She was furious. "What have you done, James?" she demanded. "Do you know how this looks? Our friends are laughing at us. The parents at Oliver's school are talking. This is humiliating." James looked at his wife. This woman, he had grown distant from over the years. "Have you talked to Oliver lately? Really talked to him? What does that have to do with?" "Everything," James interrupted. "Go spend an hour with him. Watch him with Elena. Then we'll talk." Catherine did, and though she wouldn't admit it immediately, even she could see the change in their son. But the biggest blow came on a rainy Tuesday evening. James found Elena sitting alone in the kitchen, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes red from crying. She tried to hide it, but James had become more observant. He sat across from her and waited. Finally, Elena whispered, "I received a letter today. My mother is very ill. The doctors say I should come home soon." The word struck James like a physical blow. He realized how much his family had come to depend on Elena, not just for lessons, but for the warmth and kindness and life she brought into their cold, enormous house. But he also knew he couldn't keep her from her family. That would be cruel. "I'll help you," James said immediately. "Whatever you need. Medical care, expenses, flights. Consider it done." Elena shook her head, tears flowing freely now. "You've already been so kind. I don't want charity. I just need to be there for her." James leaned forward. "This isn't charity, Elena. This is gratitude. You've given my son and me something I can never repay. Let me do this, not as your employer, but as someone who finally understands what it means to truly care about another person." Elena's walls crumbled. She told him everything. The crushing guilt she carried for leaving her family behind. The dreams she had buried in the soil of necessity. The loneliness of working in a foreign land, always apart from the people she loved most. James listened, not as a billionaire, not as her employer, but as a man humbled and broken by her strength. Within 3 days, arrangements were made. James's private jet carried Elena back to Bulgaria, but she didn't go alone. James accompanied her, along with a team of doctors and medical supplies. Oliver wanted to come too, and for once, James said yes. When they landed in Sofia, a car drove them 3 hours to Elena's village. James had seen poverty on news reports, but experiencing it firsthand shook him to his core. Dirt roads, small houses with crumbling walls, children playing barefoot in the streets. Yet despite the hardship, there was something else here too. Community, connection, people who looked out for each other. Elena's mother lived in a tiny house at the edge of the village. When Elena walked through the door, the old woman wept with joy. James stood back, feeling like an intruder on this sacred moment. Over the next few days, the doctors worked to stabilize Elena's mother. James paid for everything without hesitation. But more importantly, he watched. He saw how the village children gathered around Elena whenever she appeared, how their eyes lit up when she spoke, how hungry they were to learn anything she would teach them. One evening, as the sun set over the village, James sat with Elena on the small porch of her mother's house. Oliver was inside, drawing pictures with some local children. "This is where I dreamed of making a difference," Elena said softly. "I wanted to build schools here, libraries, places where children could learn and grow and have opportunities one never had." James looked at her. "What if we could make that happen?" Elena smiled sadly. "Dreams are beautiful, Mr. Hamilton, but reality is often different. What if I told you I want to help make it real?" Elena turned to him, confused. James took a deep breath. "I've spent my entire life building things. Companies, buildings, investments. But none of it has meant as much as watching you teach my son. You've shown me what truly matters. So here's what I'm proposing. A foundation. Dedicated education in places like this. And I want you to run it. Not as my employee. As the director. The visionary." Elena stared at him, speechless. "I'm serious," James continued. "We'll build schools. We'll train teachers. We'll provide resources. And you'll be at the heart of it all, using your gifts the way you always dreamed." Tears streamed down Elena's face. "Why would you do this?" "Because you reminded me that wealth isn't about how much you have. It's about what you do with it. And because my son deserved to grow up in a world where people like you are celebrated, not hidden." Over the following weeks, the plan took shape. James invested millions into the foundation. Architects were hired. Land was purchased. Teachers were recruited. And Elena, once a housekeeper invisible to the world, became the guiding force behind an educational revolution. The village transformed. A beautiful school was built. A library opened. Children who once played in dirt now sat at desks, their futures suddenly bright with possibility. And Oliver, young Oliver, was there through it all. He played with the village children. He helped paint the school walls. He learned that his privilege meant nothing unless he used it to lift others up. 2 months later, Elena returned to London. But everything had changed. When she walked through the mansion doors, Oliver ran to her and threw his arms around her waist. "I missed you so much, Miss Elena." "I missed you too, my dear boy." The lessons resumed, but now they were richer, deeper, Sometimes they studied in the mansion. Sometimes they sat in the garden under the vast sky, talking about the physics of clouds or the geometry of flowers. And sometimes James joined them, not as a distant billionaire, but as a father relearning the beauty of discovery. The media attention shifted. Journalists who once mocked James now wrote glowing articles about his foundation. Business magazines praised his vision. But James didn't care about their approval anymore. What mattered was the light in his son's eyes, the fulfillment in Elena's smile, the children in Bulgaria whose lives were forever changed. His wife Catherine slowly came around too. She visited the foundation, saw the work being done, and found her own purpose in supporting it. The distance between her and James began to close. Years passed like chapters in a beautiful book. Oliver grew into a remarkable young man. Brilliant, yes, but more importantly compassionate. Kind, aware of his privilege and determined to use it wisely. He spent his summers in Bulgaria, teaching in the schools Elena had built. He studied engineering, following in her footsteps, wanting to build bridges between worlds. Elena's mother recovered and lived to see her daughter honored by the Bulgarian government for her contributions to education. The small village where Elena grew up became a model for educational development, visited by people from around the world. And James? He often thought back to that one ordinary Tuesday evening when he came home early. The evening he walked through his mansion doors and saw his housekeeper writing equations on a whiteboard. That moment had rewritten the equation of his entire life. When people asked him about his greatest achievement, he never mentioned his businesses or his wealth. Instead, he would smile and say, "My greatest investment was in recognizing that true wealth lies in lifting others up. It was in learning from a woman who had every reason to be bitter, but chose to be generous instead." On Oliver's 18th birthday, James gave him a special gift. Not a car or money. He gave him a framed photograph. It showed Elena standing in front of a whiteboard teaching. Oliver, as a small boy, looking up at her with wonder. "Never forget," James told his son, "that the most valuable people in your life might not be the ones society tells you to notice. Sometimes they're the ones standing quietly in the background, carrying brilliance and kindness in equal measure." Oliver hugged his father tightly. "I'll never forget, Dad. Miss Elena taught me mathematics, but you both taught me something more important. You taught me to see people, really see them." That evening, the Hamilton family gathered for dinner. Elena was there too, no longer as an employee, but as family. As they sat around the table, sharing stories and laughter, James looked around at the faces he loved. He had learned the most important equation of all. It wasn't about profit margins or stock prices. It was simpler and more profound than that. Love plus humility equals a life worth living. And sometimes it takes a person from the most unexpected place to teach you that lesson. Sometimes it takes a housekeeper with a heart of gold and a mind full of dreams to remind a billionaire what it truly means to be rich. If this story touched your heart, remember, the people who change our lives aren't always the ones in the spotlight. Sometimes they're standing quietly beside us, waiting to be seen. Open your eyes. Open your heart. You never know whose brilliance you might be missing.